Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday night, 6 o'clock Q&A session. We've got some people logging on. Good to see some of our folks here that have been with us for the last few months, even. We're getting closer. Now we're down to a few days away from the pregame, which is the rules dropping, and then obviously game day is getting your application done and seeing those applications come in. So the rules are dropping this Thursday, and there's a lot of speculation, a lot of theories, a lot of questions, none of which can be answered until the rules drop. So we want to make sure that we focus on the things that can be controlled right now, and we'll do a little recap. But welcome Eli Scheiman from Porzio, Bromberg Newman. He is an attorney in the state of New Jersey and has been supporting the cannabis industry for a few years now. Has experience in application development, writing, corporate structuring, things like that around the cannabis industry, and he can answer a lot of questions. And his time is free right now, so ask as many questions as you can, because even I learned. But Eli, welcome. I wanted to give you some space tonight before we do some Q&A. What are you telling your clients now? And we talked about it early. There's a playbook. Everybody's sticking to the playbook. What's that playbook for you and your clients, and what other people should be focused on right now before the rules even come out?
It's a good question, David. I don't have much to say about, if you haven't started yet, you might as well just wait 2 more days until the regs come along, right? No reason to do anything in the next few days. If you have started, hopefully, you're working on stuff that's going to be easily translatable no matter what happens with the regs. Like, you're just focusing on bigger picture things like getting property, focusing on certifications and trying to get your team together, all the type of stuff that you're going to need no matter what happens on Thursday. So it will be interesting. And the CRC for the first time is 2 days early, right? Technically they didn't have to drop the regs to the 21st. I mean, that's a weekend, but they could have done it Friday. So really, I don't know what you've been hearing, David, but what I've been hearing is, there's a questionable how detailed these regs are going to get. And at least some of the intelligence that I've gotten is they're not going to be very detailed. They're going to be kind of bare bones, skeletal, just to get something going so they can meet the deadlines that they have, and we'll kind of have to just work through it. But I don't know. What have you been hearing, if anything, David?
It's been very silent at the CRC. I mean, I know just what you guys know, getting on those calls, and it doesn't surprise me that there would be more meat added to the rules as the industry matures. That just happens in every state and in every industry. There's always going to be a regulator looking to regulate, and so we have a few more days for the rules to drop. Folks, lots of work to do. If you're in the accelerator right now, you're studying the study guides, going through and watching videos, reading a bunch and taking calls with experts on how to best position. And folks that are out there, you can check out cognitiveharmony.tech to see how you can get involved. Looks like we have a question coming in, and just a reminder, this is a Q&A, so we'll answer as many questions as we can, and if the questions stop coming in, we'll shut it down for the night. And also, I should announce that on Friday, Ellie will be joining us at 7 p.m. Eastern to do a special Q&A segment in anticipation of the regs dropping on Thursday. So this will give us some time to go through and do a very high level uh, report on the regs that are dropping for you guys on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be on a different platform. I think we're running it live on YouTube, and it's going to be on all like the social medias. I don't think you even have to register for this one. So it should be pretty easy to get on and see. This is going to be again, a cursory review of the regulations and forming an opinion around what we are going to be perceiving to be the barriers. So we'll look through the regulation and identify some barriers, and then Elio and I will come on Friday night at 7 p.m. and we'll bounce them around, talk about it, and see and hear your thoughts and your questions, and of course we'll continue the conversation. Next Tuesday, Ellie's going to be on vacation, and actually he'll be on vacation on Friday night. And this is the last official duty that he's going to do before he turns off the phone on people and focuses on his family and well-deserved vacation. So next Tuesday's call, it'll just be myself and probably another team member of Cognitive Harmony Technologies. Maybe we'll do more tech stuff and kind of go through the software or something. Well, let's get to it. So we have some questions here. Actually, we have one question here. So if you're in the audience and you have questions, please start posting them now so that we can get them answered. Right now, we just have one, and it's fine with us because I'm sure Ellie could use some time away from the computer. So the first question: good evening. Can you define exactly what a team member is? Are these individuals equity partners in operating agreements? Do they have to appear on an LLC? Do they have to be listed on the license application? Well, I'll let Ellie answer these questions since these are corporate law stuff.
Yeah, team member is not really a precise term. I think that the way I was just using that was more, colloquially, informally. Meaning whatever the people are going to be, either they're going to be your other partners from an equity perspective, employees, officers, directors, chief executives, whatever those look like, can be, a team member, not a statutory term, and their role will dictate, and the regs will dictate what disclosures need to be made. What percentage equity, if they have control over the operations, decision-making authority, all that type of stuff is going to be dictated by the application requirements itself. So David and I meant more just in the generic sense, like these are the types of things that you should be doing and thinking about, rounding out your team members now while there's still time, before everything goes berserk over the next 30 days, and just more general.
So do they appear on an LLC if they're going to be, well, on an LLC, you're talking about the articles of incorporation that go to the state. That's going to be first, doing an LLC is going to be a corporate decision. It's going to be based on what your taxation strategy is, what your investment strategy is. So it's important to ensure that you have the right corporate structure, and your partners that are going to be listed on your operating agreement are in fact your partners. They're equity owners, owners of the business. And then, as Ellie mentioned, there are different levels of employment that don't require specifically to be a partner on an entity. Eli, we had talked about this a little bit, but there's a hierarchy in the law as it is right now in terms of how they assign what is it, not credit, but full consideration in a review. So the fullest considerations would be in the ownership level, folks that are on the operating agreement or in the shareholders agreement, and then after that you're gonna start you start losing consideration. I guess that's what the hierarchy means, and that'll be for like your directors and then employees below that. So.
Yep. Yeah. Highest points go to equity. 20% and above, you'll get the maximize your most points. Then any equity really. Then beyond that, officers, directors, and then below that you'll have employees and then consultants. So most points are going to be credited to the people who are actually part of your team. In the past, and in this state and other states, what happened was people would make all kinds of representations that certain people would be affiliated with your group. The state grants you an application license based on your representations in terms of the people that you're going to be with, and then these people get the licenses, and then they just drop all of the people that they represented to the state that would be part of the team. So the state's really looking for the people that you're trying to use to maximize your points to actually really be part of the operation and real team members, not just a superficial play to maximize points. That's what they're looking at.
Right. There's a term, straw man, is a reference to people that are used on applications so that they can meet some experience level or some social equity status. That's what we would consider that inappropriate, unethical. Team members that are coming on should be real and support the general mission and vision of the company on a daily basis. Unless you brought them in as a silent partner and you listed them as such, right? But you might not get the credit for their experience in that case or anything like that. So we just had one question there. We have another one. Can you post the details of the Friday session? Everybody that's logged on here will get an email about Friday's session. And we don't have a link yet. It's the YouTube channel gave us it's having us do a 24-hour wait on generating that link. So we'll have the link out to everybody tomorrow night for Friday's 7 p.m. session with Ellie and I. Is there a good resource model for helping with determining equity allocations to investors pre-license and post-license? And is there a similar resource for that could provide context for allocating sweat equity? So I haven't seen any manual in the industry. Whenever we work with, structuring these type of things, we work with, folks that have, a background in financial advisement and things like that. Especially when you're working with investors, there are certain disclosures that need to be made and things of that nature. So I wouldn't go so far as to say that there's any standard from my experience. And I've seen dozens of operating agreements and none of them look the same, or the cap tables are formed for all different are formed in different ways. And it also there's also corporations that are structured around these corporations where people are profiting from and involved in more so than they are in the actual operation. That also determine what those equity stakes would look like. And I recommend a good business attorney. And if you're needing some type of coaching, we've worked with the guys at Paro Financial, PARO. they've seen a lot of these deals and can help structure equity deals and things like that. Ellie, do you have a perspective on it? You've seen quite a bit of these.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. There's no particular model. It's all going to be situational, and depending on where you're standing, on which side, right? So if you need to submit an application, let's say in 30 days, right? Which could be the case depending on our time frame. That once we see the regs on Thursday, and you need property and someone has property, then you might have to give them a significant share of equity just based on the circumstances in terms of what's happening, or vice versa. So it's going to be situational. If you have somebody with money who's going to be funding your operation essentially, and you're the only one with cannabis experience, that's also going to dictate a significant percentage of equity because they can't get a license without you. So it's no black and white answer. You got to work through it depending on the circumstances, with someone who kind of understands how that works, particularly in terms of the license that you're looking at. Obviously, from a micro business perspective, you're going to have different types of equity considerations. If you need to submit for a minority or women-owned business or disabled veteran-owned business, you're going to have to think about those structuring options differently. If it's a conditional license, given the threshold criteria there, you're going to have to think about that differently. So there's no one size fits all answer.
We have another question here. So if someone owns 5% equity, that person would not get any credit for regulatory compliance experience. That's a question. What is a good threshold? So I'm not sure what you mean, like credit for compliance experience. So I'm assuming that this person has a compliance background, and you're trying to utilize that experience and issue that person 5% equity, and wondering if that would get the regulatory consideration. If that's the question, well, yeah. So I think the idea here is that you want to obviously assign them the 5% equity if that's your deal. But if you're going to represent their experience on an application, you need to give them like a real job, a title in your business, and say that they're going to use this experience that they have developed in their life to manage this role in this specific license type. So, if you give somebody 5% equity and they're a passive investor, and that's how you listed them, then you couldn't leverage their experience, because what is a passive investor going to do if they're not going to like be managing your seed to sale program in your dispensary, right? The state wants to know that you have people on your team that are reliable, trustworthy, that have experience in transacting these type of compliance documents. So that really does make a difference. Equity is going to be, obviously, ownership and partnership is going to be put at the top, but that experience is only going to be relevant if they're going to be operational in your business and supporting your business.
Yep, and I would just add to that 5% is a real amount. Typically below 5%, you may not need to report. We have to see what the regs say, but in the past, it's been a 5% threshold in terms of having to submit certain forms to the state. So 5% is considered real equity, and theoretically, you should get credit for that experience, assuming, like David said, it's integrated into the team itself for the application.
Next question. For municipalities that have imposed a license requirement, can you explain how these municipalities license process will work with the state license process? In the frequently asked questions that came out, the state posted that the municipalities have to approve the operations within the municipality. And so some municipalities are going to the extent of creating their own application process. And by creating their own application process, the question is, does it mean that it's gonna, does it trump the state? No. The state was very explicit in saying that the Cannabis Regulatory Commission will issue all of the licenses. So how does the municipality have its own application process and the state have its own application process? Well, we are assuming that the municipalities, by issuing their own application process, that's going to be their form of issuing the approval. Once the approval is accepted, you still have a lot of other requirements other than the municipal consideration from the state's perspective that you have to meet. It looks like some of these municipalities have gone to great extent on their application process to kind of mirror what they anticipate the state to be receiving, so you're not duplicating the work. But they go a step further in doing some of the vetting work, the local vetting work, and vetting that's going to have to be done if you were approved at some point. And so I think, from my perspective, they're looking to create a process that they can consider fair and equitable and transparent, give everybody a fair shot, and then make their picks for their approvals, and then put those approvals forward as a recommendation to the state. And the state, again, is the final authority, and they have to review and approve a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Eli?
Yeah, so when the state receives your application, within 14 days, it's required to provide your application to the municipality that you're trying to locate in. That municipality then has to tell the state whether they approve or deny of your application. If they deny your application, your state application's going nowhere. If they provide the approvals, then it will continue through the state process. The municipalities, like David said, they really don't have to do a separate licensing process. It could just be contingent on you satisfying local ordinance and land use and zoning requirements. And if that's the process, then they would advise the state that you satisfy that, your location is suitable, and then it goes back up. But the statute does also provide the municipalities with the option of having a more in-depth licensing process with its own fees, with its own requirements, limiting the number. I mean, really, they have wide latitude in doing what they want to do. So in those states, I mean, those municipalities are going to be required to go through a different process. Some of them have their own timelines, and it's going to be interesting to see how you can reconcile the municipal timelines with this state licensing process. But we're going to need to see what the regs say first before getting too far into that.
All right, thanks, Sally. Appreciate that. Next question: getting a Stockton University cannabis certification or a New Jersey cannabis certification, will that count as experience in cannabis industry? So that's a good question. It's unknown right now how far the certifications will go towards experience. It is something that we will count as a firm, and how we present your experience. If we're working with you, we're saying to our clients, do the certification. There's no harm in getting further educated in the cannabis industry. It does count to an extent, to the fullest extent. I don't know that you could replace a cannabis certificate with somebody who has 5 years of cannabis management, dispensary, management in Colorado, for instance. So if they're competing against one another, I would. This is my I'm spitballing now. We don't know yet, but I would give more preference to the person with 5 years, dispensary management experience than I would to somebody with cannabis certification. But if you came to me with a cannabis certification, there was somebody next to you with no cannabis experience, no cannabis certification, then I would rank you higher. That's speculation on how it's gonna go down. We know to an extent it has to be accounted for, but we don't know if it's going to be the fullest credit for that. So remember, folks, you're competing. So, this is just the certificate is a tool in your arsenal. And any certification and training, any, real world experience is going to be important. Next question. Can you apply for, actually, Ellie, did you want to weigh in on that one? Certification and if through experience?
Yep, I agree with your comment.
Okay. Can you apply for a conditional micro and conditional non-micro business license at the same time, usually using essentially the same real estate and application materials? Could you possibly win both? If so, do you get to choose? Ellie, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think it's somewhat open, but there's language in the statute which suggests that you wouldn't be able to apply for a micro and non-micro at the same time, particularly if you have ownership and control. So gray area at this point, but I'm leaning towards a no on that.
Yeah. We have to see, right? Micro business and a non-micro business conditional.
You definitely can't hold both at the same time, and there's no
No
question.
way. You wouldn't be able to hold both.
No.
I agree with you 100%, but applying to both, there could be a way. We don't know yet.
I think it's unlikely.
Ellie thinks it's unlikely, and it probably is. I'm wishful thinking, maybe. All right. You're welcome. If one does not have enough cannabis-related business experience, but has a good amount of small business experience, how would that hold up with a micro business? Business experience is going to be critical if you're going to be demonstrating your ability to manage any business. It is, somebody who ran a telecom company, multi-million-dollar telecom company, highly regulated, business, that has a lot of requirements for reporting, versus somebody who worked as a cashier in a dispensary. If you have those two, people competing against each other, I would think that the person with the highly regulated experience would trump, even, a lower level, lower management experience in the cannabis industry. So it's all going to be, it's really relevant. It's really based on what the experience is, what level of that experience is. So if somebody's, operating at a very high level and that small business is managing a government contract, that has, that's a very highly regulated industry, that experience will probably be very competitive against someone with, a cashier experience behind a dispensary counter. It really, you have to get into the job description when you're talking about your experience and highlight those areas of highly compliant processes where somebody was accountable to a highly regulated process. And so, but if you're a small business owner and you rent 2 campsites like me and my wife, you're not gonna, you're not gonna compete well with just that against somebody with cannabis experience. So the business experience is gonna matter, especially if it's coming from a highly regulated industry. Ellie?
Yeah, I agree. It's unfortunate. Like, most people are just not going to have legal cannabis experience, right? Because we're really talking legal cannabis experience. So, like, how are you supposed to have it? New Jersey's had a really limited, restricted market. So, to me, we'll see really what the state has in mind, and if they're trying to really have a diverse and more equitable program, you can't penalize people for not having regulated cannabis experience. So, David's point becomes critical. It's more you're looking for analogs and showing that even if you don't have that, one, I'm trying to get the understanding through those certification courses potentially that going to the prior question, but two, I have enough experience showing that I understand how to work in a complex system and follow the rules. So if New Jersey is actually really serious about making a diverse and equitable program, they will give credit, to those applicants who can show that despite the lack of regulated legal cannabis experience. And I think particularly on the micro business side and the conditional licensing side. So we'll have to wait and see, but you can only do what you can do, that's all you can do.
True story. Whew. Got questions today. Do we know anything about the capital requirements at this point? Just for one of the license types, which was the fully vertically integrated medical type, where they're requiring something like $15 million or something like that, Ellie?
Yeah,
right?
for the clinical registrant license, it's 15.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, we don't know at this point what the fees are going to be for the licenses. We don't know, for somebody that's submitting a conditional, if they waive the requirement for real estate, if they waive a requirement for funding to be met, within the first 120 days, and they under a real conditional license type, you may have less requirement for putting up money up front. If they require real estate, and you're needing to show big funds, then it becomes more expensive, and more riskier, and riskier, I should say. So we're hoping that it doesn't get that way, and that they alleviate some of the requirements, using their term abbreviated application for conditionals. But let's say you're full in. You got to consider the cost of your real estate. You have to consider the cost of your infrastructure build out. If you've met with a security person and you determine that your real estate needs to have you're doing a micro dispensary, you're allowed to transact upwards of 1,000 pounds per month in a micro dispensary. So somebody who has held 1,000 or seen 1,000 pounds, I could tell you that space isn't light. It's not a small space, but it's not a huge space. So you're still going to have to spend money on that, and creating a safe room, and you might have to put in the sensors and the automatic lock systems and the cameras and a lot of infrastructure. You can be taking on significant infrastructure costs if you're doing something like a dispensary, where you're dealing directly with the public and you have to have multiple security parameters being met, that come along with serving the public. Whereas if you're a manufacturer or a cultivator and you're not servicing the public, well, you still have a security requirement. It's less, it's different. And there's still cost in that, and how the structure in your facility has to be laid out, for things like, quarantine and receiving and delivering, things like that. So, those costs could fluctuate. Depends on like what condition the property, the real estate that you acquired is in. If it's a facility that's just bare bones, it needs significant infrastructure, you could spend anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000 at the low end, upwards of $1.5 million on a high end, just to get a building to be compliant. Now we're not even talking about hiring all of the folks and your operational capital needs, and and you're going to need supplies, you're going to need marketing, you're going to need packaging, vehicles and things like that. And so, depending on your business model, and the companies that we're working with currently are all going to be spending, upwards of $1 million to $1.5 million, when all is said and done, at the minimum. And that's for most of the those are for the 3 micros. Confident in saying that, but if you're doing an annual, that number could be anything, because if you go after a huge cultivation space and you're trying to get the biggest tier level, and you're willing to pay the big dollars for having more space, then it's going to cost a lot more, right? So there are folks that are you are seeing some institutional investment type companies. Like if you look up Poseidon Garden Ventures, they're a private equity firm. They put money into companies like this all the time, and they're going to be looking to make a major play in New Jersey, I'm sure, if they haven't already. But the point being is, there's there is capital out there, but it's very competitive to get that access to that capital. So you need to be, you need to be defining your team, defining your mission, your vision, and you should be out there having conversations already, asking people, what if I do get a license? Would you back me? And if so, how much would you back me for? And what do you want? Right. And those conversations should be happening now, and anytime you can possibly have it with someone that's interested in investing in the space. Yeah, that's my short perspective on capital requirement. Eli?
I think you covered it.
Okay. We have another question here. It's the last question, so if you have more questions, feel free to post them. Can you comment on supply issues? Should I be concerned about getting enough cannabis from new growers? I worry about competing against MSOs and street dealers. Good point. So, well, first, you don't have to worry about competing with the MSOs, because if you're a dispensary, they're probably going to want to sell as much product to your dispensary as possible. I would be, looking at the MSOs as probably the first real supply availability in the state. So I would be looking to have those conversations. If you're going to do a dispensary in the state, you want to get to the networking events, get to the trade associations, try to link up with some of the existing folks in the state, see if you can see if they're going to be doing supply deals. Right. So, then you have, the next phase of growers that are going to be months behind the current operators. So obviously, if you want to start from day one, your only source of cannabis is going to be from one of the current operating folks in the state. If they announce the 2018, perhaps maybe they'll be up and ready. We don't know. So that's the start. The strategy that I would deploy if I was going to open up a dispensary in New Jersey is I'd be talking to all the growers, people that are trying to apply now, and getting into the networking events, getting on the Reddit groups, going to the Facebook groups, looking for people that are going to be applying in this round. And a lot of these people, if they get licensed, are going to be happy to have a buyer even before they start growing their weed. Remember, they're going to need capital as well. And so there's nothing that can stop you from putting a purchase order and a deposit on any of that supply. And so what I would be doing, as a dispensary operator, I would be marketing the heck out of my company right now to all of the potential growers in the state, all the potential manufacturers in the state. You need to have purchase power to do that. You can't just go to the market without money. You have to have purchase power. You have to know you have to have a fund ready to go. So if you're a dispensary operator, no one's going to front you their weed. You're going to have to buy it. And if you're going to try to buy the best and you want a consistent, constant supply, your strategy needs to be purchase power. People need to, think about your company and say, oh, that company is reliable. I can go and pre-sell my whole crop to them, get paid, a good amount of that coin now, and know that, once my harvest is done, that it's going to go somewhere. They want to hear that. What they don't want to hear is they don't want to have, try to replicate this deal with, tens or fifties or hundreds of people. So if you can offer a cultivator, a good consistent buying purchase power, then that's going to set you up in a better position. And getting involved with these potential growers now is important because you can get a letter of intent from them today and say that if I win a license and you win a license, well, then we're going to do business together. And, and that could, help fortify their position, help fortify your position, and conversations with their investors, and even perhaps even with the state. Maybe they ask for those type of documents in the application. Maybe they don't, but if they did, and if they're looking for it to see if folks are pre-positioning and getting ready, could show a level of preparedness that they might be interested in as well. So I'm not necessarily, I wouldn't be worried about a supply issue, because I would start working on that now. I would work at it as soon as the licenses came out. I would try to find out who all of those operators are, reach out to them and see what their dreams are, what they're trying to accomplish, and see if you fit in that script. Ellie?
Yeah, it is a concern, at least from my view. The existing operators are going to be able to convert over as of the 21st, right? So they're going to have months ahead on everyone in terms of production output and serving the adult use market. And everyone's going to be scrambling for that supply because there's going to be no other supply for the newly licensed entities, right? If you're getting a license, it's still going to take you 8 to 12 plus months to get operational. So the only ones who are going to have a supply are going to be the existing MSOs or the existing operators in the state for a period of time. Some states, like Illinois most recently, limited the amount of product that you could get from any particular, let's say, cultivator or manufacturer, right? So you can't have all your supply from only one entity, which is theoretically good. It keeps the options open for many people if you can't just get your supply from one place, or one place can't only supply to another place. So hopefully, the CRC has thought about those issues and thought about how people are going to get their products. But again, at least on the cultivation side, there's only going to be a limited amount of cultivators for the first 24 months, if not longer, just because of the build out time. So I do think it is something you need to seriously think through. David's suggestions are really the only workable suggestions at this point. Try to get agreements with people in place that are in the similar position to you, and try to push your way through. But at some point, you're going to have to be dealing with one of these existing operators. I mean, I think that's apparent, just given the timeline here, and that because they'll have a year head start on all of you. So that's all you can do. That's all you can do.
Yeah, and I should plug Cognitive Harmony's community board. The accelerator CHT Cognitive Harmony Technologies. We are going to be looking to bring people together, and within the accelerator, pairing different license types with each other to network and get to know each other. And there are other events that aim to do that. NJ Insider does a great event pretty much quarterly now. At this point, they'll be having one coming up in September. You should be following NJ Insider and looking for ways to get involved. There's also the New Jersey Cannabis Association with Ed DeVoe. You want to look into those type of trade associations. There's going to be other folks in those organizations that are going to be applying. So get involved, get involved, get involved. So cannabis events. So somebody asked, we would like to attend the National Cannabis Festival coming up. Cannabis events are super important for a number of reasons. One, if you are a licensed operator and you need to buy a lot of equipment, and you need to secure good insurance, you need to secure packaging, supply chain. Going to a trade show, it could be very effective if utilized correctly. And if you're looking at going into a show to simply just network, and find maybe somebody that can be on the other side of a LOI, a letter of intention, to do a deal with you. That's also a good reason to go. If you go to a show with purpose and you have a mission, they can be very effective. But if you're going to a show just because it's a cannabis event and you don't have a mission there, it could be a waste of a lot of time and money. So, going to shows, there's a strategy to that to make it very efficient and productive. So it really depends on what your mission and vision is. Regarding capital needs, should I offer equity immediately or push for a loan? Any particular rate on return? I can't answer that. I don't talk about investments. I don't know anything. Like, there are people that are professionals with that. Registered financial advisors. You could talk to your lawyers about it. Lawyer, you have an insight?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question to answer without context. It's like the same one, that we were talking about before. It's all going to be circumstance dependent. How much money you need, what you need it for, and the rates. I mean, the rates are going to be variable depending on who's offering the money. If it's an institutional investment platform versus just an individual. I mean, I've seen lending rates all over the place. I mean, they've come down significantly over the past 2 years that I've seen. But rates are typically going to be high depending on who you're getting it from. If it's friends and family, it's a different story. Plus, again, like, you need to think about how you're structuring it for what type of license that you're structuring it for. So typically speaking, and this is just a generality here, right? You want to limit the amount of people that are going to be on your cap table, on your ownership table, unless you need them there for a reason to fill out a particular need. But beyond that, you want to try to keep as much equity you can yourself, unless you can't do something without that money. And it's hard to get a loan if you're a startup, right? That's the bottom line. Like, any institutional investor is going to want to securitize that investment or that loan, right? So if you can't collateralize it in some way, it's going to be harder to get it. So again, not a satisfying answer. It depends. Happy to talk about it offline more with you if you want, but it's all depends on the circumstances.
Yeah, and I could also talk about some of our Harvest 360 experiences, and offline they're just experiences that we've had, and hopefully it can help. The next question: in the statute, the conditional license is good for 120 days to meet the outstanding requirements. Can the CRC grant an extension to that?
Yes.
That's your answer.
All deadlines can always be extended. That's the bottom line. But you're going to want to show good cause.
That's right. We had a client in Missouri, we still are watching, that have been, they just had they just had another deadline. So now it's due in January, Ellie. You'd be happy to know that. It's like, it's been now what, that'll be a year of year extension.
Yeah.
A whole year of extension. So yeah, it's all possible, but with COVID, they had a lot of issues with trying to raise capital and do construction and this and that, and so they were reasonable. It was reasonably understood by the state that they couldn't meet those deadlines, and it didn't cost them any money except for sometimes they might, sometimes people might hire a lawyer to manage those deadline extension requests. And so that may be the extent of your cost, just getting somebody to represent you at the state, make sure everything is nice and tidy. Okay. Already talked about that. So it looks like that was the last question for now.
We got some more, David.
We got some more?
Yeah.
Then the chat.
Does the extension cost money? Doubt it. Typically, they don't cost money to get an extension. You would have to submit some kind of request to the CRC demonstrating why you need it, what you need it for, the good cause, and that should be it. There could be a cost, but I highly doubt it. And if it is, it's nominal. Might just be for the request itself.
Yeah, well, I did say that, and that's what I was referring to with the lawyer fee. Like there probably is no fee required for the extension unless you hired an attorney to submit the extension request, which we've seen in other states.
Right, but if you don't do it, then sometimes you don't get the extension.
Yeah.
Right.
That is true. And why is it? It's not so much that who's submitting it. It's just how it's submitted, and lawyers have to constantly defend their position, and so inherently they're gonna approach the request as a defense of why they need to get this extension, and usually that works out for the best.
Well, and now I feel like I'm plugging myself as a lawyer here, but
it's the truth though.
And agencies, I don't, lawyers tend to get more respect from other lawyers. Agencies tend to respect, a lawyer in a certain way. It's not because they do a better job necessarily than the client could do themselves in certain situations, but it just adds a different layer there. And it's also a demonstration to the state that I'm taking this seriously. I have an attorney. I have people who are working on compliance. There are reasons beyond my circumstances. It's not because I'm not doing this properly. I've done everything I can, but I just don't have this in place at that period of time. Give me an exception. So not always. Sometimes I actually recommend that the clients engage themselves and have certain conversations because that could also be a benefit to them. But yeah, sometimes an attorney can be helpful. Oftentimes we ruin everything, but
I agree with all the time. And when the minute the conversation comes up about extension, you're getting on the phone with the attorney and say, put in the extension. If you just think that it's going to be a requirement, do it. Don't waste any time. Do it. Because you don't want to do it a week prior to. If you're going to put in an extension, try to do it at least a month before. Yeah. And give the state some time to respond and understand the consideration. So, I like that question because that's telling me, they're looking at the rules. They want to understand how they can optimize the rule, and buying more time authentically is just a great strategy always. And whenever this arises for any of our clients, I'm like, send the extension request right away. Nobody wait on this. Do it now. Just even if there's a hint of it or an intention. It's always a good practice, even if you think you might not need it. We've put in extension requests that we thought we weren't going to need, but we actually, in fact, needed it. And so, because we were all like, oh, we're going to finish this. This is no big deal. And a year later, still trying. But we constantly put in those extension requests, even though we had faith that we could finish it, but just in case you didn't know, so we put in the request. That's a really good strategy. I like that. I like that you're thinking like that. One day we might work together, hire you or something. Um, is the CRC planning to do something about municipal overreach with their own requirements and additional fees? So overreach is a interesting word to use, because is it an overreach? Lawyer?
Yeah, I really like this question too because my view is that there is an overreach, particularly in some of the municipalities. I'd be interested in seeing what the regs say about this. There's definitely been public commentary about some of the municipal approaches here. And I'm sure that's gotten to the CRC. I know some people who have, submitted comments to the CRC about that. Really, my view is the only thing a municipality should be doing is verifying that you're in compliance with their local ordinance and zoning requirements. That's it. They shouldn't be asking you to submit applications, security plans, or doing any of that stuff because they don't know anything about any of that. They're not experts on it. I mean, not that the state is in particular, but at least they're trying. So I think it's all overreach, but the statute does give them some leeway. And the FAQs, I think David pointed this out last time, seem to be giving them wide latitude. So I'm personally very interested in seeing the answer to that question on Thursday. So thank you for raising that.
Good points. Good points. Okay, so looking at the chat, all these have been answered. All those have been answered. Doesn't look like we missed anything, and we're coming up to the top of the hour now. It's been great. As always, damn good questions. Today is like the most alive Q&A since the first one we ran. I think everybody's like, you guys are probably out there like really nervous about Thursday. The rules are coming out, trying to think of every situation. I've been getting calls about this, Ellie. We spoke to a guy, a serviceman, this Saturday that's in Afghanistan. He called us from Afghanistan on video teleconference. Me and Todd took this call, and it was insane. He's a New Jersey resident, in combat in Kabul right now, of all times. And thinking about, how is he going to get involved in the industry? And we were talking about, I asked him. We were like maybe 10 or 15 minutes into it, and we were just like chit chatting, and we were like, okay, let's get into this. So how can we help you? What is it? What are some of the questions you have? And he said, guys, me and my wife have been on your Q&As every week. We've seen every single one of them, and we have no questions right now. We've had all of our questions answered, and we feel confident. We feel comfortable moving forward. I got to tell you, Ali, that made me feel really good about what we've been doing. To hear that kind of feedback is really important, because that was the intention here. Not everybody can afford the crazy, fees, and not everybody, knows that it's the right time to spend money and could afford it. But whatever reason you ended up here on this call on Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. With Ellie and I, I hope that we've been able to help you through this process and get best prepared. The rules are coming out on Thursday. We're going to be here for you on Friday night to answer any of your questions. And we'll next week is going to be game time. Ellie's going to be on vacation, and I got so much work to do next week. But as Ellie eloquently said today, well, once all your work is done and all the writers and everything is done, the lawyer's got to come in and make sure it's all done right. So he's doing it right. He's taking a vacation. He's going to clear his head, because he comes back, he's going to have a lot of work to do. I know it. And Ellie, thank you so much for hosting this with me for the last few months. We'll keep it going. Ellie, you have any last words?
Well, no, that's a great story. So thanks for sharing that. I didn't know about that. And I think the only last thing I have to say is, look, even if you can't get in on the licensing and being a licensed cannabis business is only a fraction of this industry. It's honestly, it's the service providers at the end of the day that there's a ton more opportunity for them, right? And it doesn't come at the same kind of cost and the same kind of focus. So if your dream is to become a licensed cannabis operator in one form or another, go for it, go in. But there's a place, even if that isn't, what you want to do, or you can't get in for whatever reason, there's a ton of other options for you. So don't just think like it's only a licensed cannabis business or it's bust. It's just not the case.
Good point, Ellie. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. You guys have my email. You have Ellie's email. Ellie, you want to write it can everybody see that in the chat? Write your email there. And if you need to get a hold of Ellie, get a hold of him. I'll write my email here too. David, I see some people here that I owe a call to, some people that owe me a call. So let's get at it. Y'all have a great week. There's my email. There's Ellie's email. Don't be shy. Check in with us. Ellie's going on vacation next week, so if you can't get a hold of him, call Hogan Law. No, I'm just playing.
Hogan Law doesn't exist anymore.
That's why I mentioned their name. Like that. All right, man. All right, folks. Have a good night. See you later.
Take care.